Welcome to The Explainer, where we break down the big issues using the source material itself. Today, we're digging into a proposed amendment to Tennessee's Constitution. Now, on the surface, it seems pretty simple, but the analysis suggests this is a really calculated move, one that could totally reshape the state's financial future. Okay, let's dive in.
So, in 2026, voters in Tennessee are going to see Senate Joint Resolution 1 on their ballot. And the pitch you're going to hear is simple, it's powerful. Hey, this is about protecting your home from a big, bad state property tax. Sounds great, right? But what the data shows is that what this amendment actually does is way more complicated and, potentially way more dangerous.
So why are we looking at this year, 1949? What's so special about it? Well, according to the state's own history, that was the last time Tennessee actually had a state property tax. Yeah, it was repealed more than 75 years ago.
And that right there is the million-dollar question driving our whole analysis today. If the state isn't collecting this tax and hasn't for, generations, why on earth would you go to all the trouble of banning a phantom tax in the Constitution? Well, according to the reports we've looked at, the answer has absolutely nothing to do with solving a problem that exists today.
The source documents point to a really coordinated strategy, a kind of blueprint designed by a very specific coalition of interests, and they have a very clear, very long-term goal in mind.
So who's actually pushing for this? Well, you've got this powerful lobbying force. On one side, you have think tanks like the Beacon Center of Tennessee. They provide the intellectual arguments, the framework. And on the other, you have groups like the Tennessee Realtors providing the financial muscle, funneling major contributions to the amendment's key sponsors in the legislature.
And their whole strategy, it boils down to something the reports call constitutional lock-in. The idea is to use the state's highest legal document, the Constitution, to permanently install a specific ideology about money and taxes. It's about future-proofing a policy, making sure that no matter who you elect 10, 20, or 30 years from now, their hands are already tied.
Okay, so how does this lock-in, this fiscal trap, how does it actually get sprung? And what are the real risks here? Well, according to financial analysts and the fiscal modeling in the source material, it sets a pretty dangerous trap for the entire state.
The core mechanism is creating something experts call revenue rigidity. Now, think of a state's ability to raise money like a toolbox. A property tax, even when you don't use, is a critical tool you keep in there for a massive crisis. This amendment basically proposes throwing that tool away forever and then welding the toolbox shut.
And this isn't just theory. It has real-world consequences. Financial analysts and those all-important bond rating agencies, they see this move as credit negative. And why is that? Well, because a state that deliberately limits its own ability to respond to an emergency is just a riskier bet. It could actually make it more expensive for Tennessee to borrow money for things we all need, like roads, bridges, and schools.
Okay, so let's game this out. Picture this. The next big recession hits. Sales tax revenue, which Tennessee depends on, it's gonna plummet. But with the property tax option constitutionally banned, the state's only choice is to make deep, painful cuts. And the reports are crystal clear. The very first thing on the chopping block will be state aid to local county governments.
And this leads to a system that the analysis has a pretty stark name for: fiscal apartheid. Because the pain from these cuts, well, it is not going to be shared equally across the state of Tennessee, not even close. I mean, let's be real. Tennessee's counties are worlds apart financially. On one hand, you have incredibly wealthy suburban counties like Williamson with a just massive local property tax base. And on the other, you have distressed rural counties like Lake with just a tiny fraction of that wealth per person. And this data, wow, it really paints a stark picture. Because its tax base is so small, Lake County would have to tax its residents at a rate nearly 6 times higher than Williamson County just to raise the same amount of money. That's not just hard. For them, it's pretty much impossible.
And this is where that fiscal trap really snaps shut. These rural counties are profoundly dependent on the exact state aid that's going to be cut during a recession. I mean, look at Lake County. The fund that maintains their local roads gets 98.5% of its money directly from the state. For them, cuts aren't just painful, they are absolutely catastrophic.
So here's the absolute kicker, the deep irony in all of this. To make up for all that lost state funding, these distressed counties will be forced to aggressively raise the only major tax they have left, their own local property tax. The very tax this amendment claims to protect will be forced higher and higher in the very places that can least afford it.
All right, so if this amendment puts so much pressure on rural homeowners and county services,
Who does the analysis say stands to benefit the most from all this? Who really wins?
The source material really doesn't pull any punches here. The biggest long-term winners are the large-scale commercial and corporate landowners. We're talking multi-state companies, huge real estate developers, and investment trusts. Think about it. As Tennessee attracts massive corporate headquarters like Oracle and Amazon, this ban guarantees that their huge capital investments can never be tapped by a statewide property tax to help fund the state's needs.
And what this does effectively is build what the reports call a wealth fence. It constitutionally protects the immense property wealth that's concentrated in just a few urban and suburban areas, making sure it can never, ever be leveraged during a crisis to support struggling rural schools or emergency services or infrastructure projects across the rest of the state.
So when you pull it all together, the big takeaway here isn't about stopping a tax that nobody's even paying. It's about permanently locking Tennessee into an austerity model that's engineered to weaken local governments, deepen that rural-urban divide, and strengthen corporate power. And it really forces you to ask, what is the true price of solving a problem that doesn't even exist?